Airlines are cancelling flights left, right and centre as a result of the US's ongoing war with Iran. Meanwhile, Forbes and even the New York Post are reporting that the World Cup is set to be a massive flop for this administration based on the lack of people booking up to come.
FIFA hyped the World Cup as an economic juggernaut for the US, but with 5 weeks until the tournament kicks off, the hotel industry says advanced bookings in some host cities are on par or lagging any ordinary summer. Nearly 80% of US hoteliers in 11 World Cup host cities say bookings are tracking below original forecast, with some describing the tournament as a, quote, non-event, according to an American Hotel and Lodging Association survey of members released Monday. Only a quarter of AHLA respondents are, quote, seeing meaningful incremental lift, mainly in markets with strong baseline leisure demand or team base camps. According to a report released last week by Oxford Economics, the US metros hosting World Cup games are expected to see, quote, some GDP growth this summer, mainly concentrated in the leisure and hospitality sectors. However, this growth, quote, will not have a material impact on the country's overall jobs and economic gains for the year.
The 2026 World Cup is supposed to be Donald Trump's global victory lap. The world coming to America, packing stadiums, filling hotels, tourism money pouring into host cities, and then most notably into the richest 1%'s pockets. But with Trump standing next to Infantino ready to receive his own personal winner's medal, because believe me, that is coming. But it's starting to look very different, right? The World Cup story is becoming, well, flights are being cancelled across the board, hotels are struggling, international fans are hesitating, and even Rupert Murdoch's New York Post are reporting that the projected tourism boom may be in trouble, which is significant, right? Because when the New York Post starts saying that your big patriotic sports showcase has a demand problem, that's friendly territory sounding the alarm.
FIFA is now canceling about 2,000 of its reserved hotel rooms in Philadelphia.
A report that was released in March of 2025 projected that international tourism in the United States would increase 6.5% in 2025 and another 10% in 2026. And that did not happen in 2025, did it?
Correct.
But let's take a closer look at what's happening with flights, right? Not just in the United States, but across the world. The Independent reported that airlines are cancelling flights and adding extra charges as jet fuel costs surge because of what? The conflict in the Middle East. And who's to blame for that again? Well, the key issue is not just inconvenience, right? It is cost.
We had Michael O'Leary on probably 2 weeks ago now. Yeah. And in that interview, he said, if things persist as they are in the Gulf, the phrasing he said then was mid to late April.
Yes.
Then that will lead to shortages over May and June.
Yeah, very much. That is, I'm looking at sort of the second week in May. Now, the crucial thing is, please do not panic. If you have a scenario, which we've never seen before, of airlines being told you have to reduce the amount of fuel you are using by 1/5, whether they do that because they're told to or because they think, yeah, we're going to do that, then actually they can, most of them, manage it pretty easily.
Is it going to be a case of it's just going to get more expensive? Is that what it's going to be?
Undoubtedly, that will feed through. So, for instance, EasyJet, for its summer program, is 70% hedged, locked in at a really good price for jet fuel. And that will be a kind of benefit, but that's going to gradually unwind. And so by the winter, we will be looking at certainly higher prices, quite possibly fewer flights. And that's simply because you might have a route which is kind of marginally profitable at $70 a barrel. Once you're over 200, forget it.
The Independent reports that these cancellations are primarily driven by the high price of jet fuel, not a simple supply shortage. And a lot of European airlines are struggling to manage as the conflict that Trump orchestrated looks no closer to being resolved, which of course spooks the market. And if you're wondering how this impacts flights here in the US, well, aside from the fact that Spirit Airlines literally came out and said that the reason they had to go under is because of the cost of fuel, Air Canada are making further cuts regarding their flights to the US just weeks after suspending 3 routes to their neighbour and major business partner. Air Canada plans to end 4 of its seasonal summer routes to the United States earlier than expected due to rising fuel costs. the airline will suspend its flights between many major Canadian and US airports. And this comes after, just a week ago, announcing that it was suspending flights to JFK from June 1st onwards. I mean, that's literally the month the tournament is expected to start. And Air Canada are just following suit with airlines across the globe, forced into making cuts as they cope with higher fuel costs, with many European airlines bracing for an expected shortage of jet fuel that could lead to more significant cancellations starting as early as mid-May.
Yeah, this is myself with my daughter when she was going to school just outside of Pittsburgh.
Mike Gebhardt is a frequent traveler to the United States.
Well, on average, I would probably travel 3, 4, maybe 5.
His daughter lives in Alabama, but visiting her sometimes is not easy.
I do fly out of Saskatchewan most of the time, so it is a bit of a challenge. Leave early in the morning, come back late at night.
And traveling could get a little more chaotic for passengers like Gebhardt moving forward. WestJet and Air Transat recently slashed several routes from Canada to U.S. cities.
The amount of jet fuel that you get, or diesel, that you get from a barrel of oil is about half that. It's about 11 gallons. So you can see that when there's a shortage of barrels of oil, that shortage is exacerbated by the fact that you only get, about half as much energy out of that barrel of oil that you can use in a jet or a diesel vehicle. So that's a supply and demand problem, and thus diesel and Jet A go way up in price.
Yeah. So my final question, because you're not just an aviation journalist, you're also a private pilot. How is this affecting you?
Yeah, I got to fly to Calgary in 2 days, and it's probably costing me about 25% more to fly to Calgary in my airplane. So
when you look at all that, it's not exactly the backdrop that you want before hosting the world's biggest sporting event, because, the World Cup depends on one very basic thing: people being able to fly. And right now, the global aviation system is saying, sure, we might be able to, but it'll cost more, take longer, and your flight may be replaced with that email that usually starts with, "We regret to inform you," just a few weeks before traveling, which, as I've mentioned in a previous video, my family members have received as they planned on coming to watch Scotland in June.
The global flow of jet fuel has adapted dramatically in recent weeks.
But the UK does import 65% of its jet fuel, a significant amount from the Middle East, but also from America, and some is refined here. The airlines have been clear there's no current shortage, but these plans are aimed at allowing them to better plan and minimise disruption.
What the government's doing here is basically just saying, we're trying to avoid the possibility of last-minute trauma to people's holidays. So really, you might find that you're told, if you're flying from Gatwick to Nice in the south of France, we've cancelled your flight, but there's another one an hour earlier, so off you go.
The UK now has just 4 refineries after 2 were recently closed. They're being asked to maximise production, and it's possible airlines will be allowed to use lower grade jet fuel from the US too.
And this matters, right? Because the World Cup it's not like the Super Bowl. It's not just one city or one weekend. It is weeks upon weeks of matches across an entire continent. International fans need flights that connect. They need hotels, trains, visas, ground transport, time off work, and enough confidence that this trip will actually happen and they won't get detained for an offensive tweet they posted.
According to Amnesty, more than 500,000 people were deported from the US last year. That's over 6 times the capacity of New Jersey's MetLife Stadium, which will host the World Cup final. The group says organizing body FIFA should seek assurances from Washington that immigration enforcement operations will not take place in and around stadiums. Amnesty also wants assurances that peaceful protests will be allowed and protected. It has called for the lifting of travel bans on fans from countries like Senegal, Ivory Coast, Haiti, and Iran, and says the safety of LGBTQ fans must be ensured. But the group says the tournament raises further human rights concerns beyond the US.
In Mexico, we've seen over the recent months that there has been criminal violence associated with gangs, and the response to that is a massive mobilization of security forces, including mobilizing 100,000 security personnel for the World Cup, including 20,000 military personnel.
In Canada, Amnesty is concerned that efforts to beautify host cities could see homeless people displaced. The World Cup starts on June 11th in Mexico City, and Amnesty has a message for the fans.
We're not saying don't go. we're not saying don't enjoy it. I really hope the fans do go and enjoy it. But it's been about knowing the reality and making those judgments. The real question is towards FIFA and to the national governments. How do they make the environment safe enough and welcoming enough and inclusive enough?
And to add to Trump's headache, the New York Post reported that foreign soccer fans are skipping the US World Cup altogether, threatening what was supposed to be a $30 billion economic boom for the country, which is a pretty brutal headline for Trump considering how much he depends on this tournament. For him, it's supposed to be proof that the world wants to come to the US, that it is in fact the hottest country on earth as he's described it. But when you partner that with the latest Forbes piece, it's clear that the world thinks otherwise. According to the article in Forbes, hotels across 9 of the 11 US host cities are reporting reservation rates well below expectations. Some are reportedly down by as much as 95%. That's according to the New York Post. I mean, 95%, that's not softer than expected, right? That's a disaster waiting to happen. And the Post also reported that FIFA released about 70% of its hotel room blocks, which triggered widespread cancellations and only worsened pressure on hotels.
The city is hosting 6 games this summer, 5 in the group stage, and a round of 16 knockout match on the 4th of July. It's not clear how many FIFA still has reserved in the city ahead of the tournament. The Hotel Association releasing a statement about the cancellations, and it reads in part, "Despite these reductions in Philadelphia, we remain optimistic. We are hopeful that any released rooms will be absorbed by strong demand as fans from across the globe travel to Philadelphia for the 2026 FIFA World Cup."
That's another major red flag because FIFA won't just release huge blocks of rooms because demand is suddenly overwhelming. It releases them because expected demand is not materializing the way that planners had hoped. And for host cities, that's a serious problem also. And politically, it's all terrible for Trump, right? Because for all his flaws, Trump understands spectacle. He wanted the World Cup to be his North Star, seeing as everything else seems to be going haywire. It was sold as a major economic boost and one that he desperately needs going by his latest polling numbers on the economy.
With the Strait of Hormuz still effectively closed and President Trump considering an extended blockade, there appears to be no end in sight to these soaring gas prices. And now a new Fox News poll finds that for the first time in more than a decade, Americans trust Democrats on the economy more than Republicans. Democrats now carry a 4-point edge over the GOP on that issue and an 8-point advantage when it comes to inflation and prices. Now, Democrats haven't had an advantage like this on the economy since 2010 when Barack Obama was president as the country recovered from the Great Recession.
How many of you have regularly voted in a midterm election? All right. Not everybody. How about this time around? Everybody voting? Just about. All but one. So I'm going to come to you. I want to know what holds you back this time from voting.
Well, honestly, what has been holding me back is I feel like the change that I was expecting from the president himself, I don't feel in my everyday life, which is concerning to me. I still feel, obviously, that, prices are very, very, very high. If you're going to the grocery store or just in general, because inflation still exists. Unfortunately, now we have the higher gas prices, which really hurt, everyday people in their pocket. And I've voted my entire life. And the frustration right now is, it's just unbelievable because what really changes? I just feel like that we're kind of, kind of steering the ship in the same direction.
That's interesting.
But all this, it paints an image that he doesn't want broadcast across the world. The danger for Trump is that the World Cup is becoming less of a victory lap and more like a televised audit, an audit of how he's handled the infrastructure of the country, an audit of tourism, an audit of his immigration policy, an audit of whether the world actually still sees the United States as a welcoming place. And the early signs are not looking good.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to add the MeidasTouch podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new updates every single day.